Welcome back to Great Lakes Junction, everyone. So on the old 65 Ford today, we have a rear brake cylinder in here that's leaking. It's not leaking badly, but it's got enough of a leak that there's fluid running out behind one of these rubber caps. It's running down, it's collecting in the bottom of the brake drum, and I can see it running out the back of the wheel. So we haven't lost enough fluid to get any on the brake linings, which is good because these are relatively new linings that are on here. So we're going to be able to save all of these parts. We just need to get a new wheel cylinder for it. There is a special brake tool that you can buy. It has a round hole that goes over that pin, and then it has a little piece of metal that when you turn it, it kind of goes under those springs to help get them off. I find the screwdriver works just as good. A little bit trickier putting them back on with this. And the same with these springs to hold down the brake shoes to the backing plate. There's a special tool for them also. A regular combination set of pliers that has two settings on it. I find they work just as well. There's a pin in the center of it that you can feel the head of on the back side. If you hold the pin, push in, turn, they come out, there's the pin. So when you're putting them back together, you can see the slot in there. So your spring, you'll line up that slot so it's straight up and down with the arrowhead of that pin. Push it straight on over the pin, give it a half turn, it's done, it's locked in place. I kind of lay out the springs as I'm taking them off. You know, the spring that came off this side's over here, the spring that came off this side's over here, because it does matter the order they're in when you put them back on. So that way the layout just kind of helps me remember whereabouts they're going. There's one more down here on the bottom that's attached to the adjuster arm for that star wheel. I should have taken it off before I took that hold down pin out, because now the brake shoes all want to move. But we can still do it. Now the arm for the emergency brake is attached to this brake shoe. There's a clip here. You need to spread that clip open, and that can sometimes be because it wants to spin around, so you can't just pry the end open. Okay, I've got it to open up a wee bit, and it's moved up on the pin, so there's a bit of a gap between the clip and the pin. I'm going to get a small screwdriver in there so I can pry it up. Now we get a bigger screwdriver in. Now the one area that you will typically have an issue, and we are having the issue here, the brake line where it goes into the back of that wheel cylinder, the line and the fitting end of it here, they'll rust together. So you turn the fitting and the whole line wants to twist with it. And we don't want to twist the line off or kink it, because then we're going to have to replace the line also. So we'll keep jiggling it back and forth for a bit, see if that will break free. Okay, maybe we'll try some penetrating oil. We'll let that sit for a little bit, see if it'll help us out. Well, our penetrating oil didn't help. I'm going to put a bit of heat on it. Well, this one just does not want to crack loose. I would say we're going to buy a new line also. It's not worth fighting with that anymore. Let's see how the other end's going to come apart. Okay, the other end's going to come apart all right. Okay, we'll take the rest of that line off out of our way later. Bleeder nipple we're not going to worry about. Hopefully there'll be a new one that comes in the back of the new wheel cylinder. We got a couple of 1/2-inch bolts on the back of this to hold it in. Should be all there is to taking it out. That's it. So I know these things are quite corroded inside because I've taken them apart, cleaned them all up as best I could, and they did work for several years, but they've just corroded to the point where they are not going to seal anymore. So that's why we're going to start replacing them now. It's our wheel cylinder we just took out. I'll show you what I'm talking about with all the corrosion. All it is a hollow cylinder. So your brake fluid enters this and sits in the center of this cylinder. There's a spring in the center, one of these rubber caps on each end of the spring, and then you've got these pistons that will sit on each end of that, and these are just dust boots that go over the end to keep the dirt out. So there's your assembly inside that cylinder. So your fluid's inside these rubber seals. Step on your brake pedal and the pressure forces these outward. There's a steel pin that sits through here that your brake shoe is against. So when you release your foot off the brake pedal, the springs that you've removed on the brake shoes pull all of this back together. But these are so corroded up, and the insides of the barrels had some corrosion too. You can see how the ends of this is just all corroded because they're aluminum. If these are the originals, they're nearly 60 years old now. Now, I did inquire about these once a few years back, and they said there was 2 different sizes of them. So, and I didn't know which size this was. So I'm going to take them with me today, or take this one with me today. And it says right on this rubber cap, 31/32. So it's just under an inch. And he had, I think he said he had 3/4 inch and 7/8. So maybe the bore in this is 7/8 maybe. No, it's 31/32. I don't remember that as being one of the options. So we're definitely taking that with us so they can measure it themselves and see what it is we need. I could get away with a smaller one if the 7/8 one they had, as long as this circumference around here, there's actually a circle here where it sits in that backing plate to bolt in. As long as that's the same and our length is the same, we can get away with a little bit smaller bore on it. So the next thing I need to do, I'm going to put my drain pan underneath that wheel assembly there. I'm going to spray everything down with brake clean, get it all cleaned up, and we'll head to the automotive store, see what they can do. I don't expect them to have it in stock. It's something that they're likely going to have to order. Well, they didn't have it in stock, which I didn't think they would. So they ordered one in. It only took a couple of days to get it. And there is a left and a right to these when you're ordering them because of the position of where the brake line goes in. So the opposite side of the car, the hole is on this side for the brake line. So they're actually 2 different part numbers if you're getting a left one and a right one. Yep, so our circumference of the circle where this sits in the backing plate for mounting is the same on the new one as the old one. So we should be fine that way. The position of everything is the same. So we're ready to put it back together. It's hard to get the camera in a position where you can see what's being done and for me to actually do it without then getting in the way of the camera. So we'll try on this side to get everything in a position here where you can see more. So there's our pin that we have to reuse that we cleaned up. We're going to set that in the end of our new cylinder. So there's our pin that holds the brake shoe to the backing plate. So I've said before, with these lock pins, there is a special tool you can buy for them that I've never bothered with. There's kind of an arrowhead on the end of that pin. I keep it straight up and down, and there's a groove in the cap on that end of the spring. Now when it comes to the cap on this end, make sure that groove is straight up and down, right in front of your pin. Push it over it, give it a half turn, and it locks it in there. That's what holds everything into place. So now we'll get springs and stuff lined up. That new spring in there with the extra tension it has really makes a difference. It's constantly trying to force these things apart. And we don't have any of our other springs in here to hold everything in place yet. So everything counts to keep moving on us. Okay. Yeah, we'll get you a little closer here now that we've got that assembled. So that cable goes in the back. There's a shield there at the end of that spring, and it's got a groove in it for that cable to run around. And then the cable attaches to this piece in here. And there's another in a spring, I don't know if you can see that spring that also attaches in the same hole and runs across. This is your automatic adjuster. So when you're reversing in these old cars and you step on the brakes, this brake shoe expands outward, which pulls on that cable. It pulls this piece up, and you can see the star wheel there. When you release the brake pedal, this spring pulls this back down, turning that by one cog in that star wheel, and that tightens up the brakes that little bit. So once it's reached its proper adjustment, it'll just slip past that. It won't try and turn it anymore. So that's how that mechanism is all meant to work in there. So with that side all attached, now we only have one spring left. So we'll get our brake shoe in place. Might be in the wrong hole there. Maybe we're supposed to be that one. There. Alright, so we have them reassembled. So now when you step on your brake pedal and the fluid expands that, pushing your shoes out for your brakes on. When you take your foot off the brake pedal, the pressure of all these springs pulls everything back together again. Now we still have to put a new brake line on this car. Okay, this is going to be really tough to show you stuff. So here's our new brake line. It's a straight line when you buy it. I needed 24 inches. The closest they had was 30 inches that was already pre-made. So it has the ends and everything on it already. And it's just a straight piece of pipe. So we need to do some bends in it. So you can see it's straight along the axle right now, and you can see where the end of the pipe is compared to where it needs to go. So it's about 2 inches difference in here. So we'll bend it so that we get our 2-inch rise, and then another small bend to where it threads into here. Now that's not perfectly straight out, it's on a bit of an angle also. So we'll have to play around a little bit. But I'll show you what I'm using to bend this pipe. You don't want to put any kinks in that brake line. So make sure you got your fitting up at the end of your line. You don't want it down here, put a bend in it, and now you can't get the fitting down to the end. So make sure the fitting's at the end. This is a simple pipe bender. So the idea is this little hook that's going to keep your line from trying to swing up as you roll this end around here. And we want to try and keep that pressure tight in that groove so it doesn't just bend and put a kink in the line on us. So just like that. So we have a nice smooth curve in it. There's no sharp kinks or anything in the line. So that should get me about a 3-inch rise, but I only needed 2. But now I need to turn the end of this a little bit to get it into where it's got to go. That gets a little trickier because we're such a short piece. So we're going to work with that first. We're going to see how that lines up, make some adjustments wherever we need to in our bends. And then when we get to the other end of the line, we'll do the necessary bends at the other end to make it connect up. I'm not going to try and do all that with the camera under the car. It's just too tight under there to keep the light, the camera, and everything out of my way so I can actually do the work. But I wanted to give you an idea of just how that simple little pipe bender works anyhow. Okay, so I'll try and show you what we ended up with. So the splitter box on top of the rear end is up in there. So that was the end of the new line that we had to bend here to put in. So it runs along the rear end nice and straight. And that was the first end that you saw us putting a couple of bends in there. So everything's installed for the lines, the brakes. So now we have to bleed this brake system because that new line and that new wheel cylinder is just full of air. Oh, we get to try a new tool. So this is a brake bleeder valve kit. So it's basically a little hand vacuum pump. Comes with a big assortment of adapters to fit different size bleeder nipples and things like that. So according to the instructions, the bleeder nipple is closed right now. So you pump this up to create a vacuum in the reservoir that comes with it. And then open the bleeder nipple and the vacuum draws out all of the air. Close the nipple, pump up the vacuum again, and do the same thing. So we're going to keep doing this, see if this system works to suck all the air out of the system. Without one of these vacuum pumps, there's a video I did several months ago where we were doing some brake work on this car. I didn't have this pump at the time, and you need a second person, someone that can sit inside the car and operate the brake pedal. So you loosen the bleeder nipple, push the pedal down to push air out. They hold the pedal on the floor while you tighten that bleeder nipple, let the pedal back up, repeat, and keep repeating that process until you have no more air coming out. It's just straight brake fluid. So this pump hopefully eliminates having to have another person. We'll see how it works out. Well, we'll get the back wheel all back on. Job's complete. That brake bleeding pump that I had for drawing the air out of the system, it works, but it takes an extremely long time. Following the directions, using it the way it's supposed to be used, I probably worked at it for at least an hour with that hand pump, and it was still drawing air out of the system. I gave up, waited for my son to come home, went back to doing it the old way, and we were done in 10 minutes. So I guess if you were really stuck, you were by yourself, the pump would work. But if you've got another person, it is far faster to do it the old way. So that wraps up this video. Once again, thank you very much for watching.